Welcome back to Wellness Wave Radio. Thanks for tuning in this morning to ride the wave with us. Each week, our goal is to give you at least one suggestion that will make your life a little better. My name is Phil George. I'm a clinical biochemist, a certified personal trainer, and health coach. Please remember, everything we discuss on the show is for informational purposes only and should not be taken as medical advice, especially on this show because we're going to be going through a lot of medical stuff today. I have a radio show too on WCRN in Westboro, and that's the Howie Carr, Woosocks Railers. So what we do is people will email me, they'll listen to the show with specific medical questions or questions about supplements or whatever. In fact, if you want to email me, philgeorge@charter.net, and you have questions for me, what I'll do is if you have a question, you actually can help a lot of other people too, because if you have a question, I can almost guarantee you a lot of other people have the same question. This could actually be a multiple series here because I got an email from a physical therapist, and I have great respect for physical therapists. They really know their stuff. This woman especially, she really takes a deep dive into this stuff, but this is a common problem, especially among women. It also affects men, but more so among women. So she has given me a whole bunch of stuff. In fact, it's going to just be touching the surface here in the beginning. So I'll probably continue with this particular email over and over again because if you can see, she's sent me over all of her lab results, bone scans, and MRIs and everything else, all of her lab work. So again, I go over each one when I'll do a free consult. Anybody that wants one, again, email me philgeorge@charter.net. You can just email me and I can read it. Obviously, I'm not going to mention your name. In her case, I'm just going to mention her first name. But if anybody ever wants to come on the show, Dave Asprey, he's the one that started this whole thing called biohacking, which I'm a biohacker. I measure everything. And you can't change what you don't measure. So you got to see what's going on with you. So I got Oura rings and stuff like that measures all what's called by biometrics, everything going on in my body, my heart rate variability, but that's a whole other show. All in my body temperature, everything it measures. So I can see what I'm doing and what I'm, in terms of what I'm, different changes I need to make or any particular supplements I'm taking or how I'm sleeping, I can adjust it. Hopefully for a healthier life. So let me just start off with her letter. It says, "Hi Phil, my name is Pam. I'm a 66-year-old physical therapist who listens to you on the weekend mornings. I'm on my way into work. I work per diem at X hospital." She goes on to say, briefly, I had my bone density checked. So what a bone density is, they sent you into basically like an MRI type of machine, and it measures how much bone density you have. This is a very good thing. Anybody any women out there that's reached perimenopause or menopause should get a bone density done. This should be covered by your insurance because you need to know because the whole show is going to be on osteoporosis. So osteo basically means bone, porosis means porous. So your bone becomes more porous. The more porous it becomes, what will happen is, if you can imagine like an oak tree, right? And let's say you have some kind of worms into the oak tree, and they keep eating away at the wood inside the oak tree. Eventually, a wind comes over and they'll knock it over. The same thing can happen if you have osteopenia and osteoporosis. So what osteopenia is a precursor, or it comes before osteoporosis. So it's kind of like a warning sign. You got to watch out. We got to do something because if you don't do something, the osteopenia is going to turn into osteoporosis, and you could wind up having spontaneous hip fractures. So let's say you come down with osteoporosis and you fall down, you could wind up, fracturing your hip, fracturing your bones and things like that, which is not a good thing. They've also done studies that a person, past the age of 60. If they have osteoporosis and they wind up fracturing a hip or a bone, they have a pretty high chance they're going to die within the next year because this is kind of a cascade. It's just the beginning of a lot of bad stuff happening. If you fracture your hip, your recovery period is going to be very, very long. But since you don't have much bone to begin with, it's going to get worse. So I had a hip replacement done 25 plus years ago. Now, normally a hip replacement only should last about 20 years, and then you should have what's called a revision. They have to go back in and fix it again. The revision, the second surgery, is a lot worse than the first surgery. So just to give you a recap. So the way they do the way they fix, basically your osteoporosis in your hip or a hip, where you need it, they put, actually, they did for me, you can imagine a metal rod, pointy metal rod, and they pound it into your femur, which is the long bone going into your thigh muscle. That has a little ball at the end of it, a little round ball, and the round ball is made out of metal, okay? And on top of the metal, they put a plastic to hold it between your hip and also this rod, so it holds it in there like that. But what happens over the course of 20 plus years, that the plastic part of the bone is going to start wearing away, and you'll have the metal bone onto the hip joint, and then you get problems. They have to go back and redo it. That's a nasty surgery. So I'm a biochemist, and what I wanted to prevent this from happening. So what I did is, about every year or so, I would have to go back and see the orthopedic surgeon. He would do an X-ray and see how well that's holding up, or if it's starting to break away. And if it starts to break away, then they have to go back and do what I mentioned before, which is the revision. But let me get back to Pam's question. She says, briefly, I had my bone density checked last year, November 14th of 2025. It shows osteopenia. Again, osteopenia is the precursor, comes before the osteoporosis. And she says, see attached. So she sent me the actual MRI of the hip so I could see what it looked like. This is currently what I'm concerned about. What I mentioned, she says, I did add a collagen product to my supplements in January and don't think it has helped. I will be out of my current product in 3 weeks and want your advice on your recommendation for a good product. So let me get into the architecture of basically what happens with your bone. So what happens if, in your house, if you have a wall, like a wall right here, the way the wall is built, they have something called scaffolding. So it's kind of like it's what you see in terms of a lot of holes in it and stuff. And what they do is they have the scaffolding there, and then what they wind up putting in is plaster. They put plaster over it. So the analogy I like to make between what's happening with the scaffolding, that is what the collagen is. So your bone is made up of a lot of different things. A good portion of your bone is what they call collagen. So collagen is the most ubiquitous. That just means the most prevalent, basically protein in your body. It's in everything. It's in your nails, it's in your skin, it's in your bones, it's everything. So you need a good form of collagen. Again, feel free to email me, philgeorge@charter.net. You want to get the right kind of collagen. You want collagen from what they call grass-fed, grass-finished cows, because there's two types of collagen. One of them comes from what they call industrial cows. So this is what 99% of all collagen comes from if you buy it off the shelf at Walmart or whatever. They're going to go with the cheapest form they can, and the cheapest form they have is what they call industrial cows. So what they do with these poor cows, they put them in a big barn, and and as you know, cows naturally eat grass. They're out in the pasture and they're munching away at the grass, and that's what cows are used to eating. But it's more expensive to put a cow in a pasture, have 10 cows in a pasture eating grass, than it is to have a whole bunch of cows in a big barn. And what they do is they have them sit there and they feed them grain. Now, that's not a natural diet for cows, is not grain. The other problem with grain is grain, in order to make a lot of it, they spray it with something called glyphosate, which is Roundup. Roundup is basically what it is. It's like a pesticide, and the pesticide is sprayed with this toxin Roundup. If you've seen, there's a lot of lawsuits coming out, multi-billion, a billion now in California. And what they're finding out with this glyphosate, it causes a lot of problems. It causes a lot of cancers and stuff like that. The other thing is they want the cow to be as fat as possible. So in these industrial cows, and this goes for meat that you eat, I think only 1 to 2% of all meat you get is from grass-fed, grass-finished cows. So you want to look for what they call grass-fed and grass-finished. This confuses a lot of people. You'll see grass-fed, but what they do is they let the cow go out in the pasture for a little bit of time. Then they put them back in the barn and they feed them grain with the glyphosate, with the Roundup, the poison in it. But again, they want the cow to be as fat as possible. So what they do is they inject them with something called human growth hormone, which makes them fatter. And they also, because they're so in such close quarters, they can get sick because they're next to the other cows and they spread diseases around. So they also inject them into antibiotics. 90% of all antibiotics made, if you come down with a bacterial infection, they're gonna put antibiotics in you, and that may be good for a short period of time, but you don't want that long term, because if you take an antibiotics, it also kills the good bacteria in your gut. So you don't want that. But these poor cows, they're feeding this all the time. So whatever that cow eats, you eat. So if you're taking the collagen from these industrial cows, or from your meat that you're getting, or even from pigs in terms of pork, they do the same thing with these poor pigs. What they do is they put them all together, they feed them human growth hormone, antibiotics, so whatever that pig or that cow is eating, or the chicken, they do it with chickens too, so you want free-range chickens. This comes the whole gamut here of all the animals. You want free-range chickens, you want your eggs from free-range chickens, again, because those are the healthiest. You're not getting any toxins into there. So again, feel free to email me, philgeorge@charter.net. This is what Pam is asking me. Pam's asking me and I saw the particular collagen she does, and it looks pretty good. I haven't done a deep dive into it. But the other thing is, I suggested to Pam what I'm going to do. I'm going to send her the collagen that I take, and maybe she can try something different. But that's only one part of it. Remember, the collagen is the scaffolding in which all of the calcium, the magnesium, the phosphorus goes into the bones. So your bone is made up of a lot of different minerals. It's made up with phosphorus, calcium, magnesium. You need all of these things to make up a healthy form of bone. So that's one issue. So you want all of these different nutrients, and you need to get these things in order to make good bone. Okay, so we're going to get into a little bit of biochemistry here. So you have two particular cells that go inside your bone. One of them is called an osteoclast. Osteo means bone. Clast means taking away. Your bone is constantly being turned over and over again. So when it takes out the bad bone, that's the osteoclast, takes out the bad bone. The osteoblast puts in the good bone. So it's constantly turning that bone over and over again. And this is what you want. Unfortunately, if you end up seeing a doctor and they see you have osteopenia, osteoporosis, what they're going to recommend for you to do is to get on something called a bisphosphonate. A bisphosphonate, most people think it's called Fosamax. So the generic name is Bisphosphonates, the bisphosphonates, but the brand name is like usually Fosamax is what they give you, but there's different names for this bisphosphonates. Unfortunately, doctors treat numbers. Okay, this is allopathic Western medicine as opposed to what I do, functional medicine or holistic medicine. What they do is they treat numbers. So what they'll do is they'll put you on this Fosamax or this bisphosphonates, and what'll happen is, the way it works, remember we have the osteoclast takes the bone out, osteoblast puts the bone back in, turns it over and over again. So what this Fosamax does, or this bisphosphonate does, it slows down the taking out of the bone, and it just puts the bone back in. Now that may sound like a good thing. So you may come back every year, and what they'll do another bone density on. They'll say, look at Pam, this is great because your bone's growing back, and that's correct. But the analogy I like to make, basically an oak tree. Oak tree is very strong, it's very stiff, it's very, very brittle. And you have a willow tree, and the willow tree bends. A lot of people don't realize this, but what happens, bones actually bend a lot. They bend an awful lot. In fact, a lot of ways they treat in terms of osteoporosis, osteopenia, what they'll do is they'll actually put you on a machine. If you ever see these things at a gym where you put your legs up and you press hard on it, it actually bends the bone. It stresses the bone, so the bone will regrow and put the osteoblast, and it builds bone, but it keeps the bone turning over. So a lot of people will do that in terms of to help build up the bone. But these bisphosphonates, or this Fosamax, what it does is it downregulates the osteoclast. So all it does is puts bone in. So the analogy I like to make, if you have a hurricane, and the hurricane is very powerful, if you have an oak tree next to a willow tree, if it's strong enough, it'll snap the oak tree, right? Because it's very brittle. It'll snap it in half. The willow tree will bend, and it'll go with the, kind of go with the flow of and it won't break. So you want your bone to be very flexible. You don't want it to break. So it'll say normally on these bisphosphonates or on this Fosamax, it will do. It'll say, yeah, each year your bone will show more and more bone density, but it's becoming very, very brittle. And an orthopedist will, a lot of times they'll call it a Fosamax fracture. In other words, you can have your jawbone will just spontaneously fracture because it's become so stiff and so brittle, it'll just break. So a lot of times a person will come in to see an orthopedic surgeon and they'll have a break in their thigh muscle or in their jaw or somewhere else. It'll just fracture spontaneously. That's not a good thing because the bone is so brittle. In fact, it's recommended if you're taking this bisphosphonate or this Fosamax, you only want to take it for maybe 3 years to build it up, but you don't want to be taken long term. Unfortunately, a lot of physicians they'll just let you stay on it. It'll look like you're building more bone, and you are, but it's not the good kind of bone. It's not the flexible bone. It's the brittle bone. So what'll happen is when you go on there, if you go on with the osteopenia or the osteoporosis, they will give you a score, a number. And it'll say within the next 10 years, you'll have like an 8% chance of having a fracture unless we do something. And that's correct. You do have that fracture. But remember, if you're just building bone but not recycling the bone, your bone's becoming more and more brittle. And again, feel free to email me, philgeorge@charter.net. I can send you studies on this. Okay, this is common knowledge. This is me making this stuff up. It's well known. So if you're on a Fosamax, a bisphosphonate, you shouldn't be on it for more than 3 years or so, 3 to 5 years, because your bone's getting more and more brittle. So what Pam, the physical therapist, wants to know, my advice, and a lot of people don't know this, so this is stuff that I know Pam doesn't know, and she's a physical therapist, and she basically, she sees patients all the time with this kind of stuff. So I emailed Pam back, and I said to Pam, Pam, this will not only help you, it'll also help your clients. So where was I? Blah, blah, blah. She says, okay, we talked about the collagen. She says, here is the long version. I have always been very active since college. Until 2017, I ran 2 times a week for 3 miles. She had her right hip replaced in January of 2017 due to severe osteoarthritis and haven't run since. Same thing happened with me. I had severe osteoarthritis in my hip, and I basically, I coached tennis at Becker College. I coached tennis at Worcester State. I ran Worcester team tennis. And I gave tennis lessons and everything else. So my orthopedic surgeon, and I loved tennis. My whole life was tennis. And he said, if you keep playing tennis, it's going to shorten the life of the hip replacement. Then you're going to have to have the revision done, which I didn't want done, nasty surgery. So I had to give up tennis. I didn't have to, but I decided it wasn't worth it for me to keep playing tennis. Because what happens, in fact, remember the orthopedic surgeon said, I don't want you to do anything that causes you to kind of jump on, jumping up and down, which tennis is a lot of jumping up and down, going up and down. So I didn't do that. What I wound up doing is I replaced my tennis into I go to the gym just about every day. But I'm very careful not to be jumping up and down because I don't want it to wear out my hip. So I know I'm doing resistance training and things like that. So one thing you can do in terms of to prevent the osteoarthritis, or even to prevent it even happening, you want to do something called resistance training. What resistance training is basically is working your muscles. You lift heavy things. Again, you're pushing away on things, building it up. So not only are you building muscle, okay, what you're doing is you're also building bone, okay? Because not only are you stressing the muscle, you're also stressing the bone. there's a condition called hormesis. What hormesis means, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. So we have two prime directives as a smart monkey. The one is not to die, and number two is to reproduce, so we can keep the human race going. But we have to stay alive to do that. So the more stress you put on your body, within reason, the more your body gets stronger. The analogy I like to make, you probably heard of Spartacus, the whole thing, Spartacus, where he went in there and became a gladiator. The way he started out was, you remember the old slave ships over there, rowing, rowing, rowing. So I could go in as a slave, and I could be, a skinny guy, but I'm rowing, rowing, rowing every day. My body says, I got to get stronger because I'm rowing. And Spartacus built up all of his muscles by rowing, because that's a complete body workout. Not only are you working your upper body, you're also working your lower body. So rowing is a very good way to do a complete body workout. You will gain a lot of muscle, but you will also gain a lot of bone mass. Good bone, because the bone is turning over. So if you've got osteopenia, osteoporosis, again, not medical advice, I would do resistance training. I'm a certified personal trainer too. In fact, one of the things I do as not only a trainer but also as a health coach, a lot of people, they have to go maybe see 3 people. They got to see, and I'm not a physician, they got to see their doctor, they got to see a nutritionist, and they got to get trainers. You may be seeing 3 people. So I can give you all 3 at once. So you don't have to see 3 different people. So when I work with clients, I'll work on their diet, obviously. I also am a clinical biochemist, so I understand the biochemistry, so I can help you with that. I'm also a health coach. I can help you with the nutrition. So I can take a client from soup to nuts. I can do everything. So I may start you off and say, okay, and I work with bodybuilders, I work with the average person, I work with everybody. So I can sit down with you and look at all of your lab work. I can look at your bone density. I can say, okay, this is where you are. Let's get that bone mass built up again. So I can work with you. It's really important. In fact, on this past Saturday, I had somebody that owned a gym that was a personal trainer. We talked about this stuff in terms of how to work out correctly. It's kind of dangerous to go to a gym on your own and try to pick the stuff. Like, you're not going to learn how to play golf on your own, how to play tennis. You need a professional like me to show you how to play tennis, how to play golf, how to exercise, because the worst thing is to go into the gym and to hurt yourself. So I'll sit down with you and show you how to do the right exercises, what to do to build up this type of stuff. The other thing they found is there's a condition called sarcopenia, and sarcopenia just means a wasting away of the muscles. So they found out if the more muscle mass you have, the healthier you are when you age. So it's important to have muscle mass. A lot of people have a lot of back problems. The back problem is not because of the back, it's because your muscles are too weak to hold up the back muscles. So when I work with people with back issues, what I do is I work building up their core muscles. The core muscles, if you ever seen a skeleton like by itself, all it is a bunch of bones going together with little spaces between it. But what happens if your muscles aren't strong enough, all the pressure goes to your back, so you're not able to hold it up. So you want core muscles. So I have very specific protocols to build up your core muscles to make your back stronger, and also to get your bone stronger. The same thing. So that's one way. That's one way of doing it. But okay, personal story. So what I did, again, every 6 months or so, I was seeing my orthopedic surgeon, going in there, did an X-ray. I'd come back in and he'd pull it up and he'd say, well, you're losing some, some of the plastic in the hip replacement. So, we got to keep an eye on this. So I remember one time I went in and he said to me, you do have osteopenia, the beginning of osteoporosis on the hip, just on the hip, nowhere else. I wasn't having no other issues with osteopenia in my back or anything else like that. So I did research. I'm a biochemist. This is what I did. I did research, and I ran across something, and I contacted the physician that did it. And it's something called PEMF, Pulse Electric Magnetic Field Therapy. In fact, this is something I recommended to Pam, and Pam had not heard of this. Okay, again, she's a physical therapist. A lot of people don't know about this. So what Pulse Electric Magnetic Field Therapy is, what it is basically it gets a very particular electrical signal into your body, And what that electrical signal does is it stimulates the osteoblast and the osteoclast to turn that bone over, to put more bone in there, okay, to build it up. So that's the first thing I recommended to Pam. So what I did with and fortunately the orthopedic surgeon was very open. I contacted this person, I looked at, did the research. There's a lot of studies behind this, so I'm not making this stuff up. I can send you the studies, this works. So what it does, it sends an electrical impulse into your bones to build up the bones, to reverse the osteopenia, osteoporosis. So I sent the study, and I said, gave it to the orthopedic surgeon. I said, look, here's some studies on this, and I like to do what's called an experiment called an N of 1. This is in statistics. An N is the number of people that you study. So an N of 1,000 would mean they studied 1,000 people on this, and this is the results they got. The larger the number, it's called a double-blind placebo. It just means that people didn't know whether they would take them. It's called a placebo, which means there's nothing, and a person that actually did the protocol, in this case, the PEMF. So I showed him the study. He never heard of it either. He's an orthopedic surgeon. And he said, let's give it a shot. So I said, what I want to do is I want to try this PEMF for 6 months. And I want to come back and I want to do the bone density again on my hip. So what I did is I could actually maybe I'll bring it with me next time and I'll show you what it looks like. So there's a mat that you sit on. And you sit on the mat. Whoops, I just knocked off my microphone. Sorry, Art. Put it back on. Okay, so I got the mat. Like I could literally be sitting on it right now, and there's a little thing a button that controls it, and you put it on, and it sends an electrical signal through. You don't feel anything, doesn't hurt, nothing like that. So I bought that. I bought the mat. So if I'm sitting on the computer, if I'm sitting, how much time we're lucky? 3 minutes. And I'm sitting on this. I did that. Then there's a long mat on my bed. I put it on my bed and I slept on it again. I was on this 24/7. I was on this all the time. I was either sitting on it or I was laying on it. Plus, I had another device that I hooked to my belt, put it on my hip, a little round disc. Anywhere I went, it was constantly sending that signal. So I was constantly turning that bone over and over again. And long story short, I went back. Before I saw my orthopedic surgeon, he did the x-ray, and he was like, whoa, the osteopenia is gone. I grew all my bone back. So I'm, again, N of 1, just me, I did it, but I can show you studies that this is actually, they worked on this. This has actually happened. What I'm going to do, we're running out of time, I have another protocol that I sent Pam also. To try it with this. And the email back I got from Pam said she was really interested in the PEMF, Pulse Electric Magnetic Field Therapy. She was really interested in that because she never heard of it. And I'm going to send her, where I got her from, and I'm going to send her all of the studies because like any scientist, physical therapist, she's a scientist. A good scientist is going to say, show me the studies. Don't believe me, show me the studies. And I have the studies. So this is something you can do. It's non-invasive. What I like about it too, supplements, you have to buy them over and over and over again. There's supplements for this too. Obviously, there's calcium and vitamin K2. That's a whole other show. You've got to take the right supplements because even if you're doing it, you need the right minerals. You need calcium, magnesium, phosphorus. Because if you're growing the bone back, you have to have the nutrients in there, the collagen, all the stuff I'm talking about, so it can grow the bone. It's not enough just to have the signal to grow it. It's trying to grow, but the bone's saying, I need these electrolytes to go in there. I need these minerals to go into the bone. So that's the other thing you need. So if you're in your 50s or anything like that, you want to get ahead of this, ladies. This works for men too. You may have it for men too. But because women, when they reach perimenopause or menopause, the estrogen is very protective of the bone. You've lost that, ladies. You've lost it. So you want to grow it back in. So even if you're in your 50s, something you may want to be thinking about, maybe you want to get a bone density done in your 50s ahead of time. So I know I'm running a little long here. I'm going to do a part 2, maybe a part 3, maybe a part 4 of this. I did a whole show on this actually this weekend. So if you want, email me, philgeorge@charter.net, and I'll send you the link to the show. I go into more detail there. But I'm going to cover, I'll cover the stuff. And maybe next week what I'll do, I'll show you the mat that I have, what it looks like, and you can see. I like about it, it's one and done. You buy it once. I've had this thing for 20 years. I mean, it still works. It works great, you know, one and done. It is a little expensive, but when, you know, you really want to be falling down and breaking your hip. I don't think you do. So I'm going to get more into this with Pam. Like I say, I got tons of stuff with her, all of her lab work. And I'm going to cover all the lab work. I'll help you too in terms of what she has. And I feel free to email me, philgeorge@charter.net. I do a free consult. I can do it over the phone. I can meet with you in person and go over your lab work and hopefully help you. So thanks for tuning in. I'll be back next week and go more into stuff on Pam and more on this. Hopefully this helps you. I have other protocols that'll help you too. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next week. Thanks. One of the most common questions I'm asked as a biochemist and health coach is, what are the best supplements to take? Choosing supplements is a tricky business. Many companies have poor quality control and questionable ingredients. In the past, I had to send clients to several different websites. I am now able to offer one-stop shopping for all the quality brands I recommend with no shipping cost and a lower price in most cases. Just email me, philgeorge@charter.net, for a free consult.